And that means they need to find a way to get the average person who doesn't care about news to care about news. And that means the narratives are going to get scarier and scarier. They're going to try and shock you. They're going to say crazy things like, the missing Malaysian plane may have been sucked in by a black hole. How's it going, everybody? I'm still here in Chicago, and in just a few days I'll be flying to Las Vegas for the largest hacker convention in the world, Defcon, where there'll be about a week-long coverage, and hopefully my intent is to interview security experts to learn about cybersecurity, surveillance, government intrusion, this whole kind of thing, and are we safe in the digital world, all that good fun stuff. And there's going to be a lot of other shenanigans. But today I wanted to elaborate on the video I did yesterday and keep the story going, keep talking about what's happening with this culture war, the left versus right, Lauren Southern, Patreon, and generation identity. The first thing I want to hit on is that there seems to be this trend where established media decides what someone's values are with or without their permission. We see people get labeled alt-right. Dave Rubin, I've been labeled alt-right. We see people who are called alt-light or conservative when they've never said anything that would be far-right or conservative. Sargon of Akkad has been called far-right and alt-right in the past, even PewDiePie. But I can sit down with Sargon of Akkad and have him go on a drunken rant about how he hates racism and how he's a classical liberal and he identifies as center-left libertarian, and we both actually fall in the same place on the political compass. But even though we can sit down and you can ask us, do you believe in these liberal values? And we'll say, yes. They'll say, too bad you're far-right. Because there seems to be some kind of dogmatic ideology that if you don't adhere to, it makes you the other, it makes you far-right. If you are not left authoritarian and you do not believe what we tell you to believe or say the things we want you to say, then you're a white nationalist, you're a racist, you're far-right. I have seen many journalists tweet out that Generation Identity was planning to get a boat in the Mediterranean to stop refugee rescue missions, which is exaggerating, it's hyperbolic, and I wonder, where did they get that idea? Now, I said this the other day, I'm not someone who agrees necessarily with the principles of the identitarian. I'm mixed race, so, you know, they're gonna do their thing. But they've stated their mission was to observe the NGO ships. They would rescue anyone they needed to rescue as per maritime law, and they would contact the Libyan Coast Guard and send the migrants back to the coast. But then why are these news organizations saying that's not what their intentions are? Did anyone at any point ever say that they were going to block refugee rescue ships? No, they didn't. But these news organizations are just asserting that as a fact. Now, you don't have to trust the source when they say something is true. If Generation Identity claims they're doing this, I certainly don't believe them 100%. You shouldn't believe anyone 100%. I said this before, you shouldn't believe me 100%. But when reporting on what is going on, shouldn't you at least say, Generation Identity claims they want to observe NGO ships and will rescue people if the need arises. However, we believe that their intentions may not be so pure. Couldn't you say that? No, instead they flat out say that they're trying to stop refugee rescue missions, which is an extreme exaggeration, and it pushes people into this dogmatic ideology, which is very dangerous, because we see violence arise from that. Now, if we look at the news coverage over the past several years, we can see that there has been a general misrepresentation of people's intentions. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with people who don't really know what's going on. And I'm not surprised, the average person, it's not their job to be a journalist to do research. But when we look at the Portland stabbings with Jeremy Christian, yeah, I'm gonna look into that and figure out what it is, and it turns out the guy's just kind of, he doesn't fit any particular narrative, and he's kind of off his rocker. When the Eric Clanton bike lock bashing incidents happen, I'm gonna look into that too, and I'm gonna look at video and make sure I understand what's going on. But news organizations aren't reporting on those things. They're only pushing their narrative. I think the reason for it is it's monetarily driven, but there's also something else here. There is this dogmatic ideology, where when someone decides, this group's intentions aren't what they're saying, so I'm gonna report it the way I think they're doing it. Someone else reads that and just assumes that must be the fact, because we kind of weigh journalists as the arbiters of truth. We assume that everything they're saying must be factually correct. All that's starting to change. And I think that's where we're starting to see a rift in the authoritarian versus libertarian or establishment versus anti-establishment. When I look at a lot of the people who are called far-right, conservative, when they're actually liberal, a lot of the anti-SJW crew are fairly liberal. It seems to be more that they don't trust the mainstream establishment, and they're not going to just be told what to do or what they have to believe. They're going to look into it. And it's not just these anti-establishment liberals, it's a lot of conservatives, a lot of Trump supporters as well. And I think that's why we're seeing such a big distrust in media. And I think it's why, I mean, look, Jake Tapper just called out Linda Sarsour. I think the shell is starting to crack, that this dogmatic ideology can't sustain itself anymore. I've talked before about how a lot of journalists are actually activists. A lot of journalists are also just indoctrinated and in this dogmatic ideology, so they're not going to deviate from this bubble they're in. I think there's a lot of reporters, or whatever you want to call them, who know full well that what they're saying may not be true, but they're scared to say something out of fear of being ostracized or damaging their career. That's why it's so fascinating to see Jake Tapper come out against Linda Sarsour. But what ends up happening is that platforms like Patreon, whether they're aware of it or not, they're looking at a PR disaster where they have to say, look, news organizations are reporting this as a murder mission. They're going to go block boats from saving drowning people. We can't support this. It'll make us look bad. Even if they actually go to the source and say, well, Lauren Southern said she wasn't actually planning on being on the ship and that their intent was to observe NGO ships, there's still the risk that the big media companies are going to report it as something else. And we've seen outlets like Mother Jones, Target, Patreon. They're going after the revenue of the people who don't fit the dogmatic ideology. Here's what I think the funniest thing is. 90+% of my friends are all lefty, liberal, progressive, and many of them are feminists. The people that I hang with, more often than not, are super left. And I talk to them about these ideas. And what we see on Twitter and what we see in these news articles are certainly not the opinions of the average person. But I have people who are so ridiculously far left tweeting at me, claiming to be moderate, calling me alt-right simply for saying, hey, let's have open discussion with people we disagree with. That's considered conservative. I was on over 75 flights last year, and I sit next to random people all the time. And I always talk to them to get a general idea about how they feel about what's going on, because these are your average people out and about in the world. And I think what most people online might be shocked to find out is that they don't care about any of this. The average person I talk to in a big city tends to be a little liberal and is shocked to hear what is actually going on. These crazy stories and opinions, it's just outside of the realm of the average person. We truly are in a bubble within a bubble. There's the left and the right bubble, and then there's the bigger, we're just people who pay attention to the news bubble. And it's not very large. I mean, how many subscribers do I have on this channel right now? Like 129,000? How many people subscribe to makeup tutorials? Millions. You know, so it is interesting to see PewDiePie come out and make a video saying the wage gap isn't real, because he's got almost 60 million. But the reality is the average person doesn't care. But this is where I'm going with it. The reason that I think we're seeing such extreme, dogmatic, hyperbolic content is that the average person does not care. News organizations are desperate to get clicks, to build influence, generate revenue, and that means they have to build new customers. You can't rely on the same people to watch your content. If 10 million people in this country are fascinated by liberal or conservative politics, you need your business to grow. And that means they need to find a way to get the average person who doesn't care about news to care about news. And that means the narratives are going to get scarier and scarier. They're going to try and shock you. They're going to say crazy things like the missing Malaysian plane may have been sucked in by a black hole, or that there's a group of far-right neo-Nazis who are trying to sink a bunch of refugee ships. They just need to attract a new customer base. And if moderate news coverage won't attract moderates, then they need to get more extreme so that more people will pay attention. Unfortunately, that creates a psychotic game of telephone where the narrative gets crazier and crazier, and I think now we're starting to see it spin out of control. At this point, when I see these people on Twitter accuse me of being far right, I just laugh. Because I look to what Jake Tapper said about Linda Sarsour, and I think, well, look, if the mainstream 1 million plus follower CNN reporter is saying these things, clearly the mainstream is looking at these people, these dogmatic ideologues, with a critical eye. And that means something's gonna change soon, or we're going somewhere, I don't know. But let me know what you think. Comment below. I just wanted to riff on this, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I've been plagued by this story simply because it affects all of us, you know, and the truth is, I've had people on Patreon delete their accounts, and I've lost support over what's been happening. So this, you know, it hits home. And I know that by calling out Patreon and throwing these questions at them, I've requested more comments from them, is a risk to my livelihood as well. That's why I'm going to start posting more frequently on minds.com. That's M-I-N-D-S. And you can subscribe there for $10 a month, and that'll get you exclusive behind-the-scene content from me, where I typically will write about what's going on, what my plans are, what I'll be doing, and I'll try my best to have exclusive video and other things like that. So stay tuned. The link is below. Thank you all so much for watching and hanging out. Just a real simple video. There's a million more things about this that I want to talk about, but I'm trying to keep it relatively short. So thank you all so much for watching. If you want to support the work that I do, you can go to Patreon. You can give there, or you can go to Minds and subscribe for exclusive content. I'm trying to make sure I diversify out of fear of having my only source of revenue, or my primary source of revenue, cut off. So diversification, smart thing to do. Comment below, let me know what you think. Click the like button if you like the video. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Timcast. I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m.